Okay, so when you look at the pyramids of Giza, you really look at them. There's this tension, right?
Absolutely. On one side, it's just stunning engineering. I mean, the precision, the math baked into the design, the way they line up with the stars,
Yeah.
it's almost unbelievable.
And we generally accept that. Historical monuments,
Yeah.
tombs for pharaohs.
Yeah.
But if you actually push past that standard explanation, you have to ask why?
Mm-hmm.
Why pour centuries of effort into this? And crucially, how did they get this? Well, it's almost a cult level of knowledge way back then. It seems beyond just building a big tomb.
Yeah, and that's the core of it. The standard story, the archaeological consensus it tells you, mortuary chambers, monuments to the pharaoh's eternal life. Simple enough, right?
Right.
But the sources we're looking at today, these are records supposedly kept by this internal group, this brotherhood. They paint a totally different picture. Radically different.
Okay.
They argued these monuments were built using occult knowledge because they were built for an occult purpose, rooted in a very deliberate, very strategic spiritual alliance.
So that's the line we're exploring today. We're trying to look past the stones and mortar, past the archaeology, and into this alleged secret spiritual history.
Exactly. We want to uncover this idea of a progressive revelation of rites, understand the supposed strategy behind this Egyptian spiritual alliance, and really dig into the true hidden purpose of Giza, according to these specific non-mainstream records anyway.
We're basically trying to synthesize these two clashing viewpoints for you, because this isn't just about ancient rocks. It's about power dynamics, maybe spiritual ones. It's about long-term planning, supposedly by, infernal forces.
And the hidden intent behind what everyone agrees was a massive cultural and engineering explosion. I mean, think about it. If the biggest things ever built by humans weren't actually tombs, but energy conduits, dimensional portals, that changes everything.
Yeah, it reframes history itself.
Yep.
That's the tension we want to unpack. Okay, so let's start where these sources say it began. It wasn't like an overnight thing, right? No big dramatic pact right away.
No, not at all. The sources describe it as a slow burn. Long before the pyramids, there was apparently this extended period of cultural shaping.
Syncretism.
Syncretism, meaning blending beliefs.
Exactly, blending, layering. The idea in these Brotherhood records is it was a deliberate generational process, a kind of psychological conditioning almost,
Conditioning for what?
to instill the need for complex rites, for ceremonies, for sacrifice and offerings. The human mind had to be prepared, sort of cultivated over generations to accept these things as necessary, as powerful.
So making spirituality more complicated, more demanding almost.
Precisely. Introducing procedures that were specifically Kabbalistic, astrological. It wasn't just simple nature worship anymore.
Yeah.
This demanded sophistication, dedicated time, resources, and ultimately sacrifice. It was like level 1 training for the much deeper stuff to come.
It's a pretty unnerving idea that culture itself was being engineered by these spiritual heavyweights, as the source puts it. It is, and what's really interesting is who the source claims were the main targets for this preparation. It zeroes in on two groups that became important, the Egyptians and the Celts, specifically the Druids among the Celts.
Which seems odd. Why them? Why not, say, the builders of Babel-like structures or the Babylonians? They get a lot of attention in other texts as centers of worldly power or defiance.
That's a great question the source raises. It points out this selectivity. It suggests maybe our usual metrics for historical importance, like empire size, aren't the only ones that matter in this context.
Okay, so like the Romans, for example. Huge empire, massive historical impact.
Right. But the sources kind of dismiss Roman religion as spiritually, unremarkable compared to Egypt. They borrowed a lot, adapted things, sure. But the original spiritual weight, the core rites, wasn't really there in the same way. It wasn't foundational.
So the Egyptians and Celts were chosen because their influence was deeper, more...
That's the insight from these records. It wasn't just military power, it was spiritual gravity. They were chosen because they profoundly influenced the behavior of people around them, people who made history happen. They were like the spiritual architects. Their belief systems, even the parts we don't fully understand now, supposedly laid the groundwork. They changed how spiritual power was accessed and used, setting the stage for later civilizations.
And maybe their power partly came from being hard to understand now, that obscurity.
That seems to be part of it. We hit these huge gaps in the record. Early Egyptian religion feels focused on mummification, eternity, which is fascinating, but also kind of bizarre to us.
And the Druids.
Yeah.
They're almost a complete blank slate. No manuscripts left behind. All oral tradition.
Exactly. The source suggests this wasn't just accidental loss of history, it might have been strategic. The alleged infernal strategy was not to leave obvious, easy-to-read tracks, keep the public religion complex confusing even.
But the real secret,
Kept tight within the initiated elite, the Brotherhood. That way, the core knowledge, the real purpose, could survive even when empires fell. The complexity was a feature, not a bug.
okay, so that subtle, long-term conditioning set the stage. But then things escalated, according to these sources. We moved from just, like, preparing the ground to something much more direct.
That's right. This is where Egypt is highlighted as the first civilization of real weight to go beyond basic cults and establish high-level secret rituals. And these weren't for everyone. They were reserved strictly for the pharaoh and the absolute top tier of priests.
So a shift from influencing the masses to empowering the elite.
A massive shift. The claim in these records is that for this inner circle, the mythology, the pantheon of gods, that was secondary. The veil was dropped, meaning it wasn't just about confusing stories of good gods versus bad gods anymore. The pharaohs involved, the highest priests, they allegedly knew exactly who and what they were dealing with, the hierarchy, the entities. It was explicit.
Okay, that's a huge claim. Conscious worship of, well, the dark side. How do the sources explain that fitting with the public stuff, the sun gods, Osiris, all that? I mean, doesn't that make the source seem totally unreliable? No historian backs this up.
And that's the critical tension, right? The Brotherhood records basically say this duality was essential. You have the public face, the deception layer, and then you have the operational core.
And the core revelation from these documents is
that the elite practiced conscious worship of the devil, or Lucifer, but not necessarily as a fallen angel in the Christian sense, more as the supreme chief, the true father, a god of immense power, a source of forbidden knowledge. Osiris and Isis were for the people. Lucifer was for the pharaoh.
Wow. Okay. So Lucifer as the chief wasn't working alone. There was a whole structure. You mentioned principalities, potestates, territorial spirits. Can you break that down a bit? What roles did they supposedly play in Egypt?
Think of it like a spiritual corporation's org chart. Lucifer's the CEO. The principalities are like high-level regional directors, maybe influencing whole civilizations or regions. The potestates are more specific forces, perhaps controlling ideas, political structures, intellectual trends. And each level, each entity, required its own specific cult, its own form of adoration.
So different rituals for different entities within this hierarchy.
Exactly. There were the big public feasts everyone could join, but then there were very specific, very secret ceremonies deep inside the temples and, crucially, inside the pyramids themselves.
And the source says something new appeared in Egypt with this alliance, something about territorial spirits.
Yes, that's flagged as a major innovation. The alliance with territorial spirits apparently showed up for the first time in Egypt.
Why? What's the significance of that?
It's about linking spiritual control directly to geography, to the land itself. The sources suggest the Egyptian mindset, shaped by that long period of syncretism we talked about, was uniquely ready for this. They could grasp and accept a level of spiritual geographic connection that maybe older, more nomadic peoples in, say, Mesopotamia, hadn't reached.
Okay, so that helps draw the line between just having a cult and having a true alliance.
Right.
But back in Mesopotamia, Sumer, Babylon, they definitely had cults, sacrifices.
For sure. But the Brotherhood records frame that earlier activity as more like experiments or maybe land surveying by these forces, testing the waters. It wasn't seen as a permanent, committed partnership.
But Egypt was different.
Egypt was the real deal, according to this narrative, a true conscious alliance. This meant establishing a permanent base. It meant spiritual energy wasn't just being generated for general religious feeling, but harnessed directly for national goals, politics, architecture, power projection. The fate of this infernal hierarchy became tied strategically to the success and longevity of the Egyptian state itself.
All right, so this moves beyond just religion and into, well, cosmic strategy. The sources give this really chilling picture of Lucifer's thinking. He's not all-knowing, but he's described as a master observer, watching history, watching human nature.
Allowing for pretty accurate predictions or divination of future trends, like a grandmaster playing chess centuries ahead.
And the key question he supposedly asked himself back then was,
which nation is growing powerful enough to repress those who will oppose me and one day disrupt my followers and intentions? That was the strategic calculation.
and the answer was Egypt.
At that specific point in history, yes. Egypt was pulling away from the older Mesopotamian cultures. It was consolidating, poised for this massive cultural boom. It had the potential to become the dominant force needed.
And that cultural explosion, the sudden leap in art, engineering, astronomy, the source claims, wasn't just organic growth.
No, it was presented as the result of directed revelation. High-level secrets, especially concerning math, astronomy, and construction, being deliberately given to the Egyptian elite.
And the timing was critical. Driven by some kind of threat.
Driven by the primary threat, according to these records. The promise, back in Genesis 3.15, the prophecy of a descendant, the seed of the woman who would eventually crush the serpent's head.
And Lucifer believed this prophecy. Implicitly.
Unequivocally. The source is clear. The devil doesn't doubt God's word. He accepts it as absolute truth and plans accordingly. He knows it's coming.
So he needed a powerful nation locked down, allied with him, Egypt, to act as a bulwark, a counterforce against this future eventuality.
Exactly, a stronghold, but always working through human free will and enabling them, empowering them to build this counterforce. And this is where the pyramids and their immense planning start to make strategic sense within this narrative.
Right, the long game. And this connects to something called the sealed ones.
Yes. The idea here is that Satan, through observation or some other means, the source calls it a time key, which it says will be explained later, knew or could anticipate when God would raise up specific individuals for major purposes, sealed people like Noah or later Moses. So if God was preparing his agents, the devil needed his own human infrastructure ready to oppose them, and that couldn't be built overnight. It required generations of preparation, culminating in a massive, enduring power base.
Which means the revelation of high magic, the advanced math for the pyramids, their true ritual purpose had to happen at a very specific strategic moment.
Precisely. Before Israel emerged as a distinct nation, as God's chosen people, it was a preemptive move.
Get the infrastructure in place first.
Build the fortress before the enemy even appears on the battlefield. By establishing the Old Kingdom as this incredibly powerful, spiritually compromised civilization, Lucifer created a physical and spiritual anchor, a bastion of occult power designed to last for ages and perfectly positioned, geographically and temporally, to interfere with the eventual rise of Israel. The pyramids weren't just monuments, they were strategic weapons, deployed in anticipation.
Okay, let's try and anchor this back in some historical reality before we dive deeper into the secret purpose. The first true pyramids, the smooth-sided ones, they show up in the early 4th dynasty. We're talking around 2575 to 2465 BC.
Right, evolving from the earlier step pyramids, which these sources kind of frame as the beta test or the training phase. And pyramid building really kicked into high gear, becoming the main national project, starting with Pharaoh Sneferu.
But the sources we're discussing pinpoint the real alliance, the high-level pact, specifically with Pharaoh Khufu and his family.
Yes, Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure. The 3 Great Pyramids at Giza are presented as the direct result, the physical manifestation of that specific conscious alliance with the infernal hierarchy.
And the details of their construction. This is maybe the strongest physical evidence hinting that something unusual is going on, right? Even if you don't buy the infernal pact part.
Absolutely. We have to talk about the engineering because it's just staggering. The precision, the alignment, the math involved. It seems to defy the tools they supposedly had, and the source notes, pointedly, of which there is no written evidence explaining how they knew this stuff.
The implication being?
That the knowledge wasn't developed, it was given directly from these entities.
Okay, let's set some specifics for the Great Pyramid, Khufu's. The numbers themselves are wild.
They really are. Base length, about 230 meters. Height, nearly 147 meters. Now, if you take twice the base length and divide it by the height, 3.14297. I mean, that is practically pi. Decades before pi was supposedly calculated with that accuracy. That's not just a coincidence. It points to advanced math.
And it was the tallest thing humans built for, what, 4,500 years?
Unbelievable. And think about the materials. 2.3 million blocks of stone, mostly limestone, but also granite, averaging 2.5 tons each. Some blocks, especially inside, weigh over 15 tons.
Moving that kind of weight today is a major operation.
And they supposedly did it then. Then there's the alignment. It's aligned to true north with an error of just 0.015%. I mean, that's laser theodolite territory today.
Insane precision. And the base is almost a perfect square.
Almost perfect. The difference between the longest and shortest sides is only about 25 centimeters over 230 meters.
And the official story is they did all this without pulleys, without wheels for transport, without iron tools for cutting the hardest granite blocks. How does the Brotherhood source explain this leap?
Simple. It wasn't just human ingenuity, it was revealed knowledge, a technological boost.
Okay, so if the construction itself is anomalous, what about the purpose? The source flat out says the tomb idea. That was secondary.
Yeah, the smallest objective of the demons is how they put it. The mortuary chamber idea was the public story, the deception.
A brilliant deception, really.
Yeah.
Play into the existing Egyptian obsession with eternal life, an obsession the sources claim the demons encouraged to hide the real function.
Exactly. Because the actual high magic purpose, the secret shared only by the pharaoh and the top priests, was apparently much darker.
Which was?
The primary goal was the release of sufficient focused energy, likely through human sacrifices conducted within or near the structures, to open and sustain dimensional portals or windows.
Dimensional portals. Wow. Okay, so the pyramids weren't just tombs or even just monuments. They were machines, energy directors.
That's the claim. Massive, geometrically perfect structures, precisely positioned on the Earth and aligned with the stars, designed to channel and amplify some kind of cosmic energy, acting as terrestrial anchors, spiritual gateways for the infernal hierarchy.
And this knowledge that these were functioning energy conduits, interdimensional gateways, was kept completely secret by the ruling elite, never written down in public.
Absolutely. The source stresses that nothing truly important about the core function was ever meant for the hieroglyphs on the wall. That was all part of the necessary public facade. The real secrets were transmitted directly, initiation to initiation.
And it's fascinating how even mainstream archaeology finds things that, well, they don't necessarily contradict this weird theory, do they? Like inside Khufu's pyramid, the king's chamber.
The famous red granite sarcophagus. It's there, but there's zero proof it was ever actually used for a burial. No body, no mummy fragments, no resins, no inscriptions on it saying, "Here lies Khufu." Nothing.
Which feeds right into the occult idea, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't used, maybe Khufu had a fake funeral there, like the source suggests, and was buried somewhere else secretly. His body's never been found, after all.
Exactly. And it's not just the king's chamber. The so-called queen's chamber seems unfinished or unused. There's a rough pit dug deep below the pyramid, also unfinished. It doesn't look like a completed royal burial complex in the way later tombs do.
Plus, the lack of decoration is really striking. You compare it to later New Kingdom tombs, which are covered floor to ceiling with spells, scenes, instructions for the afterlife.
Right. Inside the Great Pyramid itself, virtually nothing. No murals, no hieroglyphic texts guiding the pharaoh. The only contemporary inscription found was a simple quarry worker's mark in an upper relieving chamber, mentioning a work gang associated with Khufu. That's it.
So if it wasn't primarily a tomb, the alternative idea from the source makes more sense. An initiation temple.
The hypothesis fits the evidence surprisingly well. If Khufu intended it as a place for secret rites, for learning, for initiation into these high mysteries, then burying his body there would actually contaminate the power source, so to speak. He wouldn't want that.
And that changes how you look at features like the narrow passages, right?
Yeah.
That so-called escape corridor. Maybe not for workers escaping after sealing the tomb.
Why assume escape? The source asks, could it have been an entrance? A way for initiates to access the chambers long after the main construction crews were gone, for ongoing rituals.
And there's actual physical evidence for hidden access points, is there? Didn't someone find underground tunnels?
Yes, Dr. Salim Hassan, back in 1935, he discovered a whole network of underground passages, tunnels going down over 40 meters, linking the Giza Plateau, connecting Khufu's area with Khafre's cemetery, and even leading towards the Sphinx.
Which supports the idea of a hidden infrastructure, doesn't it? Secret access for ongoing initiation rites, completely separate from the public face of the monuments.
It certainly makes the idea of a purely sealed tomb harder to maintain. And then there's the final piece connecting Giza to high magic. The celestial alignments. People like Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock have done a lot of work on this.
What did they find?
Really compelling stuff. Using computer models, they showed that the internal shafts or channels inside the Great Pyramid pointed directly at specific significant stars around 2500 BC, the time of construction.
Which stars?
The southern shafts pointed towards Sirius, the star linked to the goddess Isis, and Alnitak, the lowest star in Orion's belt, which was associated with the god Osiris.
Okay, that's interesting symbolism.
But it gets deeper. The layout of the three Giza pyramids on the ground seems to intentionally mirror the layout of the three stars in Orion's belt. Khufu and Khafre align almost perfectly, but Menkar's, the smallest pyramid, is slightly offset.
Just like the third star in Orion's belt.
Exactly. The mirroring is incredibly precise. But here's the kicker. The huge chronological problem Bauval and Hancock uncovered.
Which is?
They found that the perfect alignment, the most precise ground-to-sky match between the Giza pyramids and Orion's belt, didn't happen in 2500 BC. It happened thousands of years earlier,
Dang.
around 10,500 BC.
10,500 BC. But that's 8,000 years before they were built. How was that possible?
Well, standard archaeology struggles to explain it. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe the alignment wasn't intentional, but the precision makes coincidence seem unlikely.
So how did the Brotherhood sources handle this 8,000-year gap?
For them, it's not a problem at all. In fact, it fits the narrative perfectly. Who plans 8,000 years ahead? Not humans.
Lucifer.
According to the source, yes. The design was intentionally conceived to reflect that much earlier Golden Age alignment of 10,500 BC. It was a way to physically stamp his claim, his sovereignty, over that vast sweep of time. The alignment wasn't just for the rituals of 2500 BC. It was meant to resonate with a much older cosmic pattern, part of the long-range plan.
So the pyramids were the stage, the tools. But the pharaohs were the actors, the agents in this drama. If Khufu made the big pact, his successor, Khafre, who built the second pyramid and the Sphinx, is presented in these sources almost as the embodiment of that pact's power.
Yeah, Khafre gets special attention in these records. He's described as embodying the all-powerful Lucifer. You look at that famous diorite statue of him, the one often shown in museums, and it just radiates majesty, power, control. It's not just a portrait. The source calls it an icon of incorporation of divine sovereignty.
You can see the symbolism woven right into it, right?
Yeah.
The triad.
Absolutely. He's seated on the throne, which itself is a symbol, Isis. Behind his head, sheltering him, is the falcon god Horus. And Khafre himself represents Osiris, the ruler, the king connected to the underworld. It's all there as the key players in the elite's occult understanding integrated into the image of the pharaoh.
And that carving on the side of the throne.
Yeah.
The simatoi.
Yes, the intertwined lotus and papyrus. That's the classic symbol for the union of the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt. Placing it right there on Khafre's throne isn't just political, it's emphasizing the source of that unity and power, the spiritual force, the infernal energy, according to these records, that allowed for such absolute unified control. His musculature in the statue is also noted as representing this potent internal force.
And the sheer number of statues associated with Khafre. That was unusual, wasn't it?
Unprecedented for the Old Kingdom.
Right.
His temple complex originally held something like 58 major statues. That included 4 huge sphinxes over 8 meters long, plus 23 near life-size statues of Khafre himself just in the Valley Temple.
That scale suggests a deliberate focus, doesn't it? Like these demonic forces were really concentrating their efforts on projecting his power.
That's the interpretation given. It was a massive display meant to solidify his divine, or rather infernally backed, authority. And of course you have the Great Sphinx itself.
Which the source calls.
The guardian of the sacred tomb of Pharaoh, Psitanus. Explicitly linking it to this infernal pact. It wasn't just a monument, it was a ritual guardian. And remember those underground passages? The source alleges a secret tunnel linked Khafre's pyramid complex directly to the Sphinx, making it part of the hidden ritual landscape.
Okay, so Khafre represents the peak of this infernal alliance. But history wasn't static. Later on, we get this incredible figure who seems to push back hard. Akhenaten.
Akhenaten, the heretic king. Originally Amenhotep IV, he just unilaterally threw out the entire Egyptian pantheon, declared that the Aton, the physical disk of the sun, was the only true god.
The first real stab at monotheism in Egypt, and pretty much unique in their history.
Absolutely unique. And it was a direct assault on the whole system, on the infernal hierarchy the sources claim was running the show through the priesthoods of the old gods, like Amun-Ra. Akhenaten rejected all other divinities.
And this led to massive changes, right? The Amarna period.
Total upheaval. He moved the capital city away from Thebes to a new site, Akhetaten. He had the names and images of the old gods, especially Amun, destroyed. And he ushered in this radically different artistic style, the Amarna style. Fluid, naturalistic, almost intimate portraits of the royal family, completely unlike the stiff, eternal formality of the Old Kingdom stuff. It was a revolution driven entirely by his religious conviction.
So the source wonders, was he just mad? Or did he have some kind of genuine revelation, a brush with the true God?
That's the question they pose. Maybe associating the true God with the sun was simply his way within his cultural context of trying to glorify the creator above everything else he knew. Whatever the reason, his actions were so radical that after his death, the priests of the old cults tried furiously to erase him from history entirely.
And this resistance might have cost his family dearly, specifically his son Tutankhamun.
The source speculates, yes. Tutankhamun became pharaoh very young, maybe around 9 years old. He died suddenly at about 18. The speculation in these records is that he was likely assassinated for refusing a key initiation rite. If Akhenaten had rejected the pact, the demons would need the next pharaoh to reaffirm it, to undergo the necessary rituals for them to govern through him. If Tutankhamun, perhaps influenced by his father's beliefs, refused,
He became useless to them, a liability.
exactly, he had to be removed so the old guard, the priests of Amun, could restore the traditional polytheistic system, move the capital back to Thebes, and get things back under the infernal hierarchy's control, which is exactly what happened under his successor.
And after this period, the focus shifts away from Giza-style pyramids anyway, doesn't it? New kingdom pharaohs built elsewhere.
Right. Power moves south to Thebes, modern Luxor, with the massive temple complexes like Karnak. And the pharaohs of the New Kingdom, figures like Tutankhamun, Ramesses the Great, were buried in hidden rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings. A totally different approach to burial and monumentality.
But the magic didn't completely disappear. What about the pyramid texts?
Ah, the pyramid texts. Those actually date back earlier, to the late Old Kingdom, 5th and 6th dynasties. They're found carved inside the pyramids of that era. They are basically collections of spells, magical formulas, instructions for the afterlife. It shows that even then, high magic, though maybe becoming more codified or textual, remained absolutely central to royal power and belief, passed down through the elite priesthood. #tag outro.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've gone way past the standard postcard view of Egypt. We contrasted the archaeological facts, the engineering marvels, the presumed mortuary functions, with this radical narrative from the Brotherhood sources.
Yeah, this hidden history of an occult alliance with Lucifer, the pyramids as dimensional energy devices, and this grand long-term strategy aimed at countering divine prophecy. It's a completely different lens.
And really, understanding this alternate story, whether you accept it as literal truth or just as a fascinating what-if, it fundamentally changes how you might look at ancient Egypt, doesn't it? Its incredible longevity, its purpose, the sense of spiritual control.
It shifts everything. It suggests the cultural achievements, the technology, the power weren't just about human genius in isolation. They were potentially fueled by and in service to this strategic harnessing of cosmic and spiritual energy set up centuries before any rival power really emerged.
The sudden leaps, the precision that baffles us, reframed as results of a deliberate partnership, infernal partnership, aimed at creating a permanent spiritual beachhead on Earth.
And that leaves us with one last kind of unsettling thought to chew on. The source points out this tension. The human builders, maybe Khufu himself, wanted to leave a lasting mark, something to inspire awe and investigation for millennia. But Satan, allegedly, wanted the true purpose hidden, obscured.
Okay.
So think about this. We have incredibly detailed records, tombs full of treasures, even bodies preserved from the later New Kingdom. We know so much about Karnak, the Valley of the Kings, but the Old Kingdom pyramids at Giza, despite being right there, arguably the most famous monuments on Earth, their deepest secrets, their core purpose, they still largely evade us after almost 5,000 years.
So the final provocative question is, was that enduring obscurity itself the most successful secret Lucifer managed to keep? Is the mystery the real victory?
Something profound to think about, definitely. Next time you see that perfect silhouette against the sky, what is it really guarding? Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.